Okay, so we are carrying on our series this morning on Elijah, and you can catch up on demand on our YouTube channel if you've missed any of that. And I think it's always good to start with a confession. I think we all like a good confession. So on Friday, Darren said to me, "How are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm a bit worried about this sermon." Gideon, can we have the first slide, please? Panic. Tick. So this morning we're talking about panic. Elijah runs away but meets God who restores him. I want to clarify before we start that I love my church family, the journey that we are on, growing and learning together. So nothing that I share this morning is because I think we're doing a terrible job. Rather, the question is, how do we continue to grow and learn together as a community and church family that increasingly supports the process of us meeting the God who restores us? And how do we make sure that we don't get in the way of that we might become even better at modelling his love and grace? So if we could have the reading, please, Gideon. This morning we are looking at 1 Kings chapter 19, verses 1 to 18. Now Ahab told Jezebel everything Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. So Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah to say, "May the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like that of one of them." Elijah was afraid and ran for his life. When he came to Beersheba in Judah, he left his servant there, while he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness. He came to a broom bush, sat under it, and prayed that he might die. "I have had enough, Lord," he said. "Take my life. I am no better than my ancestors." Then he lay down under the bush and fell asleep. All at once an angel touched him and said, "Get up and eat." He looked around, and there by his head was some bread baked over hot coals in a jar of water. He ate and drank and then lay down again. The angel of the Lord came back a second time and touched him and said, "Get up and eat, for the journey is too much for you." So he got up and ate and drank. Strengthened by that food, he travelled 40 days and 40 nights until he reached Horeb, the mountain of God. There he went into a cave and spent the night. The word of the Lord came to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He replied, "I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to death with the sword. I am the only one left, and now they are trying to kill me too." The Lord said, "Go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord, but the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face and went out and stood at the mouth of the cave. Then a voice said to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He replied, "I have been very zealous for the Lord." He's sticking with the same story. "I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to death with the sword. I am the only one left, and now they are trying to kill me too." The Lord said to him, "Go back the way you came and go to the desert of Damascus. When you get there, anoint Hazael, king over Aram. Also anoint Jehu, son of Nimshi, king over Israel, and anoint Elisha, son of Shaphat, from Abel-Meholah, to succeed you as prophet. Jehu will put to death any who escape the sword of Hazael, and Elisha will put to death any who escape the sword of Jehu. Yet I reserve 7,000 in Israel, all whose knees have not bowed down to Baal, and whose mouths have not kissed him." I absolutely love this story. When we think about life, hope, and faith in a broken world, this is such a good example of how God cares for Elijah and how he cares for us. We tend to put heroes on pedestals. Elijah has demonstrated great faith and immense courage. He has done and experienced all of these amazing things, seen firsthand how powerful God is, yet here he is in the wilderness, exhausted, alone, and terrified, so overwhelmed that he wants to die. We've seen his humanity in previous weeks, but this is Elijah at his most relatable. There's an unexpectedness in this story, not so much from Jezebel. It's not a huge surprise that she's not impressed and wants revenge. But for Elijah, after all of the highs of everything that he's experienced, her death threat is the last straw. His response is to panic and run away because he is completely overwhelmed. Can we have the next slide, please, Gideon? If this was Elijah's life plot, the bottom one, he'd be there in the middle, life in all its brokenness, done. He'd experienced so many miracles, being fed by ravens, the oil and flour that didn't run out, calling down fire from heaven, God sending rain, running all the way to Jezreel. It's probably that did it, actually. But here he is, done. It had all gone horribly wrong. How did he arrive at this place in the wilderness? I don't really mean Google Maps. I mean, what stole his confidence and caused this shift in perspective? What are the things that cause fear in our lives and bring us to that place of overwhelm? Anything from life circumstances, disappointment, whether that's in ourselves, in others, sometimes in God, uncertainty, feeling out of control. We're not hugely great with that one, are we? The unexpected. If we're honest, we expect life to look more like the first picture, and we can be really thrown by the reality of when it doesn't, and it actually looks like the second one. And media and social media missell perfection, and that feeds into this. But if we're honest, we can unwittingly peddle a missell too. Come to Jesus and it'll all be fine. What God actually said is that he's with us always through the ups and downs of life. And as you look at this life plot, where are you today? This is Mental Health Awareness Week, so some statistics. Every year, 1 in 4 of us will experience a mental health problem. 1 in 5 will have suicidal thoughts. 1 in 14 people will self-harm. Over 2 million people are waiting for NHS mental health services, and since 2017, the number of young people struggling with their mental health has nearly doubled. As well as being aware of the depth of need, we also need to be aware of the staff who are working hard, trying to make a difference in the middle of those statistics alongside the people who are struggling. Mental health, we often think about the term in a negative way, as in poor mental health. But mental health and well-being is not an all or nothing concept. It can change frequently, is affected by lots of things like work, home life, bereavement, ill health, and more. Even positive things can affect our mental health, such as the pressure after getting a promotion, or the stress of a house move, or realising you unwittingly agreed to do a sermon. The next slide, please, Gideon. We will all experience difficulties at some point in our lives. A continuum shows that we can move between the different stages of well-being, from thriving, surviving, struggling, and crisis. How do you care for yourself? We're not chopped up people, body, mind, and spirit. It's good to understand what charges you, what drains you, who is your support network. I think this story of Elijah sits at the very heart of our journey together. We've heard the statistics. God calls us to live in community. We're not made to be alone. 1 in 4. That's us too. We're not exempt from that. And our family, work colleagues, the people we love, us. We're not trained counsellors, well, unless you literally are a trained counsellor. So how can we best support each other when life is tough in a way that doesn't add to the overwhelm? So a quick recap, because that won't be in the recording. What drives disconnection? When we silver line things for other people. When your response starts with the words, at least. Platitudes. Often this is worked out in relationship. In our house, we've collectively banned the term, I understand. This too shall pass. I actually like that one, but I've been banned from using that one. Rude. Sometimes we can assume what other people need in that moment is the same as what we'd need. Giving advice. If you're reaching for the words ought or should, then you should proceed with caution. Life is really hard at times. We can be too quick to step in with solutions, largely with the best of intentions. It's hard for us to see people in pain, and we want to help make it better. Sometimes we struggle to sit with people's emotions. Sometimes we find it hard to sit with uncertainty, especially when it's with the people that we're closest to. Sometimes we misunderstand our role and we can try to fix each other. Sometimes we can want people to get to the solution without the bit in the middle, the time and the space to work it out. And we need to learn to appreciate what an amazing strength we are exerting in the meantime just to get through the day. There was in the song earlier, show me how to love like you have loved me. So what drives connection? At the time of such great need, how do we as Bethesda learn to grow together and be in a place of solace, a safe and supportive space? There is something quite precious about that. Can I have the next slide, please, Gideon? So when you are struggling, what helps you to feel connected to others? I'm looking for some answers now, by the way. What helps us to feel connected?
Smile.
A smile.
A WhatsApp message.
A WhatsApp message. Yeah. Talking to people. Yeah, to know that you're not the only person going through stuff. In the feedback from the church survey, it's really encouraging that we don't only recognise that we're a welcoming, caring family, but that we also value learning together. When you ask people how they are, really listen for the answer. Be present. When people ask you how you are, where are those safe spaces where you can be honest? There's a caveat here. Always saying that you're fine isn't healthy, but neither is telling everyone and everyone everything. That's just plain scary. And our stories aren't always ours to tell. Sometimes it relates to our loved ones. So we need wisdom in our vulnerability. And sometimes it's easier to say fine because the question, how are you, is just too difficult to answer in that moment. We need God's wisdom and compassion and love on this journey together. One of the things that we're doing as a church is running a well-being group. And this will not only help support our own individual well-being, but also helps promote our understanding of the various issues covered. Talk to myself or Mark if you'd like to find out more. And a huge shout out to Dr. Mark for the time and commitment that he puts into this, because that's on top of a full-time job that often takes him away. So if you could all tell him today that he's amazing, then that would completely unnerve, that would really encourage him. During the pandemic, Kintsugi Hope coined the term go gently. We're not perfect in how we care for and support each other. A lot of the time we get it right. sometimes not so much, because we bring our own humanity and brokenness into our journey together. Let's go gently with each other and with ourselves too. Sometimes we're our own worst critics and need to learn to speak to ourselves in the same way that we'd speak to someone we love. Can I have the next slide, please, Gideon? At times, shame breathes into us that we're not enough and we need to be cheering each other on. Who are you cheering on? Who's cheering you on? How do we sit with each other's brokenness? Perhaps the answer is having a greater understanding of God's compassion. There is an unexpectedness in God's response as to how he cares for Elijah. Sometimes our expectations around what God feels about what's going on in our lives and his response to that is more shaped around our expectations and understanding of him than the actual reality of who God is. He doesn't send the angel to remind Elijah that he should know better, given his previous experiences, or tell him that he should pray harder. Instead, he feeds him and helps him prepare for the journey ahead. He meets his physical needs first. How did God restore Elijah? Do you know what? I am in awe of the God who knows me, the creator of the ends of the earth, and yet he loves and cares for me and speaks to me in ways that I can see and understand. And when I'm lost, he finds me all over again. He asks Elijah, what's wrong? What are you doing here, Elijah? God already knew the answer, but Elijah needed to tell him. In our wilderness spaces, where the words impossible, dead end, hopeless, overwhelm, when life has just pulled the rug out from under our feet, we need to tell God all about it. We need to tell him as part of our own processing, hearing what we're saying, working out in conversation with God, hearing what he is saying. Psalm 18 says, "A hostile world, I call to God, I cry to God to help me. From his palace he hears my call, my cry brings me right into his presence, a private audience." God listens to Elijah and responds. He shows himself not in some of the most powerful and dramatic ways that Elijah was expecting, but in a whisper. "Come closer, Elijah." And he speaks to Elijah. What does meeting with God look like for you? What do you need to tell him this morning? What is God saying to you?